There's a point in leadership where everything looks like it's working. The business is moving, the team is functioning, the revenue is there. So it looks like everything is in good order, but yet you can't shake this feeling that if you were to really step back from all of it, that it would start to slip. And so you have conditioned yourself to believe that you can never take a break, never step back. And you don't think it would fall apart, but you do think that you would start to feel it pretty quickly that it won't function without you, that the business would not continue to move forward to generate revenue and to be successful. So you stay pretty close. You stay pretty involved. I'm sure some of you have probably been told you're over involved. And you likely tell yourself that this is leadership because this is what you have been taught. This is what you have been told. This is what you have been trained to do and call it leadership. But the truth is that that isn't leadership. Always having to be on and involved and never being able to take a step back isn't leadership. It is management. Some might call micromanagement, but it is management by proximity. And it is exhausting to feel like you can never take a break and never slip away and never not be there, right? It is exhausting in a way that probably doesn't show up on paper. So from the outside in, no one would think that there's anything wrong with the business because there's not anything wrong with it. It's operating. But the truth is, you're not leading a business that runs if you can never step away from it. You're leading a business that responds to you. It responds to your constant presence. It responds to your constant involvement. It responds to your constantly being available for all of it. And strong leadership does not look like being needed everywhere. So often we believe that that is a requirement of leadership, that that is the mark of leadership, is that we're required to be everywhere. But strong leadership doesn't. It doesn't look like being needed everywhere. It does not look like being the final filter on every single decision. And it definitely doesn't look like things working because you're constantly touching them, constantly involved, constantly directing them, constantly overseeing them, and having your hands in the mix. I know that many believe that's strong leadership, but that's not strength. In fact, that is a system that hasn't learned how to stand on its own because it's never learned to be independent from the leader. And here's the thing that most leaders really don't want to say out loud because it's hard to admit, but for some of you, some leaders, you're still the glue. And you have convinced yourself that because you're still the glue, that that makes you valuable. And you are valuable, but you don't need to be the glue because glue isn't leadership. Glue is what holds something together that hasn't been built to hold itself. Think about what you glue together and why. What is the glue doing with the structure? So glue isn't leadership. And if everything still sticks because of you, if everything is still being held together because of you, then nothing actually stands without you. So if you are the glue and glue is your way of leadership, then you're right. You can't take a step back from the business and expect it to continue to function and perform because that's not what you've created, it's not what you've taught it, that's not the structure you've implemented. When I sit inside a business like this, where glue looks like leadership, I'm not looking at effort because there's always effort. There's the owner's effort, there's leadership's effort, there's team's effort. Everyone is filled with effort. But what I'm actually looking at is what happens when you're not there. Because that is very telling. It's where the truth lives. To look at what happens in a business when the owner, the leader isn't there. And I can tell you that what I see over and over again, time after time after time, when I'm in beside businesses, is that when leaders aren't there, who haven't built the system and the structure to function without them, decisions pause, ownership blurs. Not who owns the business, but who owns the pieces inside. Things move, but they are slower and heavier, and there's a lot less certainty in those places. And then you step back in as the leader, not dramatically, because you're still 1 foot in, 1 foot out, trying to not always need to be there, but you step in just enough. Have you ever heard yourself say this? I'm going to step in just enough to help. I'm going to step in just enough to clean it up and make sure it's as I want it. I'm going to step in just enough to make sure that I keep things moving because I'm worried they won't without me. And every time you do that, you train the system to wait for you. Every time you tell yourself, you justify that I'm just going to step in enough to. You train the system to wait for you. You reinforce the very dependency that you say you don't want for the business because you can't step away. So when a business owner, a leader tells me, I don't know why everything still comes back to me. Really? You don't know why everything's still coming back to you? Because I do. We just mentioned it. We just pointed it out. And it's not because your team can't or won't or isn't capable or isn't knowledgeable. It's not because your team can't. It's because the system doesn't have to. Because you created the system in such a way that it has become so dependent on you. It doesn't believe it has to function without you because it's never not had you in the middle of it all. You see, strong leadership isn't stepping back and hoping that it works. That's not leadership. Stepping in and thinking, oh gosh, I hope this works. That's not leadership. The honest truth, that's avoidance because strong leadership is building something that doesn't require your constant presence to function. And so if you're not able to do that, there's avoidance, there's something you're avoiding. Strong leadership shouldn't have to be something where decisions don't need your approval to move, where ownership doesn't dissolve under pressure, where clarity doesn't disappear the moment you're not in the room. I mean, that doesn't happen by accident. That will happen by design. It happens when your authority is actually placed within the business. And this is a big thing because your authority has to actually be placed and not implied so that the team thinks they can, not assumed, not borrowed, because that isn't clarity, right? That's not clear authority. The authority needs to actually be placed within the business. And the truth is that most businesses never do this cleanly. because leaders are still staying connected in some way. They are loosely connected. And so the business is still tightly dependent on you. That one foot in, one foot out. Maybe sometimes they can, but I'm not sure I believe that. So I'm going to just be in the mix of it all. I worked with a client recently and they were a high level, sharp, they were well respected in their industry. And on paper, this business looked solid. They had done everything right. They had built it. They had a great team. They were growing and moving. But while everything looked good on paper, inside, internally, it was a hot mess because every real decision still found its way back to the owner. It still found its way back to him. And not because people asked. That's that wasn't what was happening. It was because the people were hesitating. The people, his team, they were unclear and unsure. So there was a lot of hesitation. And when that shows up in a business, hesitation is a signal. And what it was telling me is that the authority is not clear. Hesitation tells you that ownership, that the ownership isn't clean. And it can really share, it really shines a light and says the system doesn't trust itself without you, the owner, the leader, being in the middle of it. It doesn't trust itself. It's never been taught to. It's never been structured to. So at that point, we stopped talking about better communication because that's not really what was happening. And we stopped talking about more alignment because, again, there was something deeper taking place and happening. So we got more surgical, right? Really diving into who owns what fully and completely, who really owns it, and what decisions live where without any overlap, where decisions that are clean and clear without any overlap. And then where does the authority begin, but also where does it end? No messy middle, no gray space, no uncertainty. And when we started getting surgical and understanding those pieces and how it functioned, he was amazed at what happened. Because once we removed the hesitations, the team didn't struggle. They moved. In fact, they moved pretty quickly. They were pretty clean and clear, and they moved pretty quickly with each and every one of their functions. And the decision making changed without him. And he felt that immediately as he's watching how things shifted. But I'll be honest, you might think that at first he felt, whoo, sigh of relief. It wasn't. It was not relief that he felt. In fact, what he felt was this sense of loss. Because honestly, for the first time, he wasn't sure what to do without being in the middle of it all. He felt this loss because he wasn't the center of it, which is how he had built it to begin with. And this is where most leaders pull back because it's pretty uncomfortable to recognize you're no longer the center or need to be the center of your business. And it's uncomfortable because most leaders, most owners don't realize that they've been deriving their identity from being needed. They have assumed this identity such that inside their business, nothing could work without them, that their business needed them to the point that they could never take a step back, that nothing could ever function without them. And it's very common, but it's also very problematic. And so this business owner, this was really a struggle. This shift in identity was a difficult thing. And this is where faith actually gets tested, right? So it's not in the building something. You have plenty of faith as you're building it, but in releasing the control of it. I mean, that's where faith gets tested, is when it's time to release control. When it's time, so trusting that God didn't call you to build something that only works if you never step away from it. Because it's not leadership. I mean, honestly, that feels more like bondage dressed up as responsibility. That's not leadership. And so faith is really tested in these moments, in these shifts. And then let's talk about the fire, that fire inside, that fire that burned, that fire that motivated you and helped with the vision and kept you going through the late nights and all the blood, sweat, and tears. That fire, well, it's still that tension that you feel right now. But now that fire feels like frustration because there's this quiet knowing that you're still too involved, because letting go and shifting in the identity is so uncomfortable. Now, this fire, it's not burnout, but it's your internal signal saying that this isn't aligned anymore. And every time it's done that, you've just kept overriding it, ignoring it, pushing it down, extinguishing it a bit, if you will, because things were working and you were in the center of it. And it was working. And because it was working, and because you believed that you couldn't step away, and because you hadn't trained the system and created the structure to allow you to be removed or step back, it was working. But working and being aligned are not the same things. They're not. We want to tell ourselves that they are, but they're not. And your frequency is really the part that doesn't lie. Your business responds perfectly to the way you lead it. That is your frequency. It amplifies up to the way that you lead your business. So if everything still comes through you, that's the frequency that you've set. And maybe it wasn't intentional. Oftentimes it's not. It's just the patterns, the habits, the norms that we've created and settled into. And so we've allowed that to become our new normal. So while it wasn't intentional, you were pretty consistent about doing it. And that consistency created the problem of your never stepping into your faith to release control and never allowing that fire to not just burn you out, but carry you forward so that your frequency could be amplified to what it is you desired about stepping back. So if you're listening to this and you know that things are working, but they're still too dang dependent on you. And that's actually, this is where your leadership can actually shift. So it's not by doing less randomly, right? It's not by pulling back and then hoping your team figures it out and just bated breath waiting for that shoe to drop so that you can jump back in the old patterns and in the old ways. So it's not by doing less, and it's not by pulling back and hoping the team figures it out, but it is by recalibrating where that authority actually lives. It's recalibrating how those decisions actually move. It's what your business actually depends on. to function. That shift is the change in your leadership. That shift is the work. And it's that work that makes the difference in your being able to step away. And that's the work I do, because it's not easy to see it for ourselves, and it's not easy to walk that path on our own, because we get in our own way. We create our own bottlenecks. And that's the work I do, because strong leadership isn't measured by how much you can hold together. It's never been measured by that. But it's what we've convinced ourselves of. Strong leadership is actually revealed by what no longer falls apart when you let go. And that's the goal, is to be able to step out and step away and allow your business to continue to run, to operate, to be productive, and to generate.
Leadership isn't what you perform, it's what you embody. If this conversation resonated, share it with someone ready to lead differently. And remember, when your faith ignites your fire amplifies your frequency. Until next time.